Nope, but I'm sure they're there.
Okay. They're at the
Like,
beginning, move them
like
to
the
wherever you
magic
want.
you do. Thank you. We'll do the beginning. I think that makes sense. Awesome. Thank you, Brett. Good morning. It is still morning, everybody. Welcome back to our I don't know what review panel meeting. It's good to have you all. My name is Abby Stamp. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm the executive director of Measure 110. Thanks, Carly. And we are at quorum. Carly did the counting already. Thank you all for joining us yet again this morning. In just a moment, I'll move forward with sharing the slides. You know the drill. We've been here before, done this before. A couple of things that I wanted to reflect on since we last met, and I just want to again thank everybody for your ongoing feedback, is the role and responsibility of the review panel. And to recall that our purpose is to review and affirm the information that your fellow reviewers compiled to express concerns, and to ask questions to ensure high quality service areas are covered by the provider applicants for each of Oregon's counties, and that we are not the final deciders. This group is not the final deciders. The Oversight and Accountability Council is, and we are required to forward our final funding recommendations. And just like last time, I want to publicly call out that tension that we are managing at every one of these meetings is the incredible challenge of digesting and articulating and processing through so much information and so much incredibly important work that needs to happen across the state, and just how we are limited by time. If it were a perfect world, we would be off in a conference room together for a full week, right? Just working together, breaking bread together, and going through these hard conversations in person. But that is not the world we live in. We are in Zoom land and doing our best together. So thank you in advance for that. Just as a reminder, the only county that has been presented yet to the Oversight and Accountability Council was Hood River, and that was a preliminary approval because there was an application that was missed. That still needs to be discussed by the OAC. So as the review panel continues to process and evaluate and contemplate the quality and breadth and depth of these materials and applications, the OAC, we continue to fine tune how to ensure our support of that conversation for you all when you continue to meet throughout the month of January and into February and the rest of the year. So just remember that 60% of the time-ish, not so much today, but across the board for the entire state, we have to not recommend in order to stay within the formula guideline, which is what the OAC requested to be a starting point. And so just to honor and name the incredible heartache and challenge it is for such a demand for these needed services across the state, and not enough cannabis revenue through the drug treatment and DTRSF recovery support services funds, pardon me, that are available. So with $427 million statewide, the asks from each county and their burn partners is up over $1 billion, which is beautiful and also heartbreaking. Our purpose today is not to rehash every bit and piece of the application, but to express concerns and ask reviewers questions to ensure we are fully vetting and discussing the information as possible to make some final recommendations to the OAC, even though we are not the final arbiters, the OAC is. And I also wanted to share that we are in developing the agenda for upcoming OAC meetings. We are also making sure to articulate and show through tables and conversation, just like we're doing here to the OAC, existing burn grantees that are currently receiving funds and providing services, to ensure that the OAC gets the information about those providers as well, knowing that they have the hard decision of determining final funding. And so ensuring that existing grantees are named and discussed while the OAC contemplates your recommendations for a potential burn moving forward. So that is something we are also developing to ensure that we present to the OAC well as well. looking at the rest of my slides here, my notes. I was about to pull up, we're going to start with Deschutes County. We're going Deschutes, Harney, and Grant today. Before I pull up the Deschutes slide deck, are there any comments or questions before we proceed? Ron.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks for that overview and providing context and restating kind of our purpose here. I appreciate that. Just on that last point regarding prior grantees or existing grantees, in terms of presenting to the council the existing grantees prior to their decision making, I was questioning in my mind, why wouldn't we also do that here?
Because of time and because the OAC is the final decision maker. And so because in the applications that we all reviewed, the existing grantee information is included, but the scoring rubric doesn't like put a number to it, Ron, right? So it doesn't say if an existing grantee is applying, this is the number value. There isn't a weight, there isn't a way to quantify that. And our purpose, as we understand it by rule, is to look at the applications and really contemplate what was presented and give the OAC the tools and resources it needs to make those hard decisions. And so we definitely will be doing that at OAC meetings upcoming. And yeah, that's my, I could keep going and I'm just gonna not.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Jude.
Hi, thanks. I guess I have a question. So having been, because this is our 8th meeting, and as we've moved through these meetings, it feels to me like the directions have changed for reviewers. How is that going to be accounted for in the counties that we had discussions about, where now it seems like, I know that it sounds to me like just having been out and coming back, that the directions are different.
Which directions are different?
The directions about, that our goal being, and responsibilities being to review and affirm fellow reviewers. And my question when I was here earlier was, I thought that some people were eliminated without a discussion. And so if we're supposed to be putting forward information where some agencies weren't discussed because it was called to a vote too fast, are we going to be, is that going to happen again moving forward? Or if we're supposed to be reviewing and affirming?
So sorry, maybe affirm isn't the right word to use, but reviewing and discussing, right? And like, yes, those recommendations make sense, or no, they don't. And so when I call for concerns or questions about a reviewer's comments or scores, that's where the opportunity to have that conversation is. So what I also want to do is I want to make sure that there is enough time to have a conversation before moving to a motion. So what I'd like to consider for today, moving forward, not as a rule change, but as a structure recommendation, is that when we start discussing, for example, Deschutes is first, all of the providers, that we kind of start with like, let's talk about this for 20 minutes before there's a motion to be made, to make sure that folks who have concerns or questions are able to articulate that. And then it is more fully discussed prior to a motion being put on the table.
Okay. And so, and then I had watched some of the other tapes when I was out, and it looks like, have we changed back? Because it was like, we're going to approve people with the amount that they asked for, or we're not going to approve them at all. We're not going to like slice and dice people's budgets. But then I observed that that was done. So what is the current, like, moving forward on that?
Yeah. So this has been incredibly complex in figuring out how to move through this, just knowing that going with scores and a conversation about concerns and successes and opportunities isn't enough of a guideline, because we'll never get to a reasonable recommendation. So I had conversations with my leadership over the last few days, and there is a desire to, if a budget reduction makes sense, to contemplate that and to like note that in the recommendations. And I've been going through the documented recommendations through each meeting, and there's a number of times where it's brought up. but that ultimately that decision is going to need to happen through the negotiation process during and after the OAC decision of like, these are the providers we want to fund. We really want to do that. You know, this is me trying to like speak for the OAC, which is not my job. But if there's just simply not enough money to go around, that needs to be picked up in the negotiation process before the contracts are executed.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions or comments before we move on? Carly reminded me we need to do attendance. Thank you.
Okay, Amy.
I'm here.
Hi, Amy. Dharma? Think I saw her come. Keisha.
Here, sorry.
Hi, Keisha. Melinda?
Here.
Hey, Melinda.
Hi.
Nicole Silva.
Here.
Ron Williams.
Here.
Zeb Payne.
Here.
Abby.
Here.
Ariana.
Here.
Ane.
Here.
Dana.
Present.
I just saw her in the chat. Dana, are you still here?
I'm present. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Dana.
I can hear you.
Okay, I have her marked. Daniel.
I'm here.
Danielle.
Here.
Drew. Elizabeth Padilla.
Here.
Emily Pertune.
Here.
Evelyn. Grace. Gregory.
Here.
Greta.
Here.
Hannah.
Here.
John McElveen. Judith.
Here.
Juliana.
Here.
June.
Here.
Kathy.
Here.
Kylie.
Here.
Kirsten.
Kirsten will be joining late, probably.
Okay. Liz Burnley.
Here.
Mark. Maya.
Here.
Oh, there you are, Mark.
Here.
Nicole Corbin. Nicole Egler.
Here.
Rachel Lawrence.
Here.
Sam Byers.
Here.
Sarah Adelhart.
Here.
Sarah Hubner. Sean McMahon.
Here.
Stanley.
Here.
Tammy.
Here.
Tatiana.
I'm here.
And Tim.
Here.
We have 33. Back to you, Abby.
Great. Thank you so much. Okay. I'm going to dive in to present, share, tab, go. Okay. Call for conflicts for Deschutes County. You can see at the top there, the providers we will be discussing today are, if my little thing will go away, Rimrock Trails, going from the bottom because I have a square over the top of my screen, Rimrock Trails, New Priorities, Family Services, Ideal Option, Deschutes County Juvenile, Deschutes County Health Services, Don's House. I think that says Boulder Care, and what's at the very top? Because I've got a block over my screen.
Best
Best
Care
Care.
Treatment Services.
Thank you. I hope that will go away. It's a little Zoom menu. Do we have any actual or potential conflicts of interest with any of these providers in Deschutes County? Right? Hearing none, I'm going to move us forward. Okay. I want to reiterate by rule our objective that once all the applications have been evaluated and scored, the review panel may meet as many times as is necessary and must provide final funding recommendations to the OAC. The review panel must, to the greatest extent practicable, recommend at least one applicant in each service area in each county. And for each of the 36 counties, we must complete a successful majority vote, which is why the attendance and the quorum is required. Okay. So we've gone through attendance. I think we all are really getting to know each other quite well, and we're moving into the county conversations. Remember, this is being live streamed. I understand that the chat is a tool, but just know that if you have specific questions for me, it's going to be really hard for me to answer them, trying to participate and facilitate and watch all the screens at the same time. And today on tap is first Deschutes, and we've got Grant and Harney counties, and I am optimistic that we will be able to get through all three today, and if not, that's okay. We'll just keep adding meetings to our calendars. It is now 10:20, and I would like to have a conversation. I would like to propose we continue to talk about Deschutes County providers, which I'll get to in a moment, until 10:45 before a motion is presented. So that gives us at least 25 minutes of discussion. So let's start with that and see how it goes. If we need to go longer, of course, totally fine. Just want to make sure there's enough conversation in order to have a thoughtful recommendation, understanding what the OAC will be considering. All right. Deschutes County, located in Central Oregon, is known for its rapid population growth and economic development, high median household income compared to other state averages, relatively affluent population, predominantly white. The median age suggests a balanced age distribution, catering to both young and old. The unemployment rate is 3.6. Low to moderate income is 59% of households. Disability IDD is almost 8%. I've got the age distribution poverty rate below 9. Population 208,000, 97,000 is the median household income in Deschutes County. All right, here's the meat of the matter. We already went over the 8 applicants in Deschutes County. The total countywide formula available for Deschutes is $24.5 million of all 8 counties, all 8 applications that were submitted. 8 passed the minimum scoring requirement. The total ask is $30.5 million in a difference of $6 million. Keisha?
Yeah. Sorry, I don't know if I can move forward or not, but I was looking at the formula, and I just want to raise a concern that I see. No. You don't have to go back.
Oops, sorry.
I guess I'm on the first slide of the funding. But I just wanted to raise a concern that I see a lot of the recommended funding is for organizations that look like they can double bill Medicaid for both mental health and addiction services. And I'm seeing like the little organizations not being funded, those who might not can bill Medicaid.
Great. I see where you are. You're ahead of me. So I am on then the first slide with all the greens and the blues. Keisha, that's where you're at too?
Yep.
Great. Okay. Thank you for raising that. That's a beautiful way to kick us off today. And so just as a reflection of what you all, the reviewers, indicated, the ones in green had both reviewers affirmed the funding for the service area and that provider. Blue was just one and orange was neither. And in Deschutes County, there were no neither where both of the reviewers did not recommend. Sorry, that's a lot of double negatives. And so let's open this up for conversation. Keisha started with a concern about big providers potentially being able to bill Medicaid. Wanted to open that up for conversation and wait until I go to potential options where y'all might want to propose, no, that doesn't work for us. We want to fund something different based on the values of the OAC and the state. So other conversation about these applicants? June.
Yeah. Are we to the part where we talk about them?
Yeah, by all means.
Great. Okay. I see that Dawn's House had one reviewer recommend and another not recommend. Can we hear from those folks?
Absolutely. Jason, do you have a list of the reviewers or folks who are present? Remember, folks aren't present. We need just a quick couple of beats to get into those applications. Oh, Elizabeth, sorry, missed your hand. Must be you.
No, I'm a reviewer.
Great.
I reviewed Dawn's House, so I
Great,
thought
hit it. Please do.
I did not advocate to recommend funding for Dawn's House. I had some pretty serious concerns in their application. I'll turn on my camera. They actually scored relatively high, but my recommendation was based on the content and quality of their answers. They internally aligned on surface level with what Measure 110 is trying to achieve. But my biggest concern with them is that they are an abstinence-based housing program and they are at total capacity. And they've stated very plainly in their application that they often cannot conduct screenings or outreach because they are at full capacity. The other thing that really concerned me with them is that clients who stay in their housing, they're not provided with OD kits. On-site testing is not available, so they have to go to a different facility to get those testing done and completed. And then there's also, based on their previous business model, to me, it read like there was a possibility that clients could be billed for housing. I'm not entirely sure, but I felt like that was something that it should be carefully considered. The other part of this is they disbanded several of their housing projects and programs in 2023, and they're still recovering from the loss of their former executive director. The current executive director handles all of their fiscal systems by QuickBooks and is requiring staff to submit paper receipts. Beyond that, they had no growth plan for their service area objectives or growth opportunities in their staff budget. And their milestone markers needed to indicate significant growth for the amount of money that I felt they were requesting. And when they were asked about work loss plans or retention issues, they stated that they do not foresee having one because most former clients volunteer, which to me, that's not a workforce sustainability answer. That does not tell me how you're going to expand your workforce, especially when you're already at full capacity. And I also felt like there weren't a lot of opportunities for culturally or linguistically specific services on site. They were all outsourced to a referral partner. They do have an on-call translator, but there was no indication of the success rate of that approach or the response time. And then each mentor and manager at Dawn's House has a comprehensive resource list to immediately provide guidance and resources for any specific cultural or linguistics requests that they don't provide, but still it's not there. It's not on site. I just didn't feel like with all of those factors that they were an ideal candidate for Measure 110 funds. It just sounds like they're not really in a space to take on people or hit the ground running. And I do have some concerns about their principles overall on how they're running their housing program.
Thank you for sharing, Elizabeth. Any questions for Elizabeth, or is the other reviewer present?
So hi, I was the other reviewer, and I did recommend, kind of coming at it from a different lens when I did complete this, kind of similar to what Elizabeth had said of the scores being high based on how they answered the questions, and I was operating from the lens of the rubric of how they answered the questions and was it meeting those rubric numbers. So based on how the questions were answered and how they met the rubric numbers, that is why I had indicated yes. The points that Elizabeth brought up were kind of pieces, I think, when I did this that I wasn't really cognizant of, especially not really being super familiar with this. It's not the work that I do every day. So there are things that I didn't kind of know to look for or things like that. So I did indicate yes for the requests, but simply based on how they scored and what was included in their packet.
Thanks, Danielle. Other concerns, conversations, or ahas about what you're seeing here on the screen today? Keisha?
Yeah, I heard her first indicate about abstinence-based housing, which is a good thing. There is a variety of housing, and abstinence-based is an option. We found with blended housing, a lot of times more and more people relapse. But I just want to bring that point. Abstinence-based housing is still an option for some folks. And I don't, yeah, I hear a lot of, I've heard a lot, but and it seems like, I mean, I don't know. They're trying. They might not have the infrastructure of big organizations, but I don't know.
June.
Yeah, I just wondered, I mean, I appreciate both reviewers on this a lot. I just wondered what exactly would they be using the funding for if they're at capacity. If they're not planning to expand capacity, I'm just wondering what the monies would actually be used for.
Does it matter who chimes in on that, or?
No, please go for it. It's
Okay. From what I could ascertain, the funding would have been for the existing staff. So it would still be executive director salary and benefits. They have a full-time mentor and a housing specialist, and then they have a bookkeeper. So it would be for 3 different personnel. They do have some program and training cost. It looks like they would do some board training. So general board training and wellness certification is required for all staff and board members at organization to ensure they are able to respond to situations if they arise. And that seemed to be a pretty reasonable request at 20 grand. And then they have some services and supplies cost. Those span across 3 different service areas. They're primarily looking for service fees. So it would be $600 per resident. So they would waive the fee for those who can't afford it. I think that was kind of where it raised my alarm bells, because if I remember correctly, the service fees are about $800 a month. So that leaves about a $200 gap. And I wasn't really sure where that would be coming from. They want supplies for group activities. They want laptops. They want urinalysis supplies. They want Narcan and naloxone, and they want an e-bike for transportation for residents. So it's not necessarily that anything they were asking for in the budget was outlandish. I think where I'm really struggling is like there's no personnel growth, and they're asking for $1.5 million. And because they're at capacity, it seems unwise to me not to want to expand workforce in some way so that you can have intake and screening and peer support and housing.
June?
Thank you.
Hi, and maybe I missed this, but were they a past funded grantee? Which could be why. Can you answer that question?
They were not.
They were not. Okay, thanks.
Right, Danielle and Elizabeth, thank you for chiming in. Any other concerns or questions or ahas or excitement about these applicants and the service areas and program costs? When you're ready, I can move on to some potential recommendations and you can switch it out and change it up. Keisha.
Yeah, I was just wondering about new priorities, family services. It doesn't look like they even asked for much, but
Yeah, we can see that the program costs are $517,000. So perhaps their budget was more loaded to the program costs. So there was one reviewer recommended and one did not for new priorities, family services and Deschutes with different scores. Reviewer 1 was a 16, reviewer 2 was a 17. And are those folks present today? Liz.
Yeah, I was one of the reviewers. I'm pulling up the application right now.
Beautiful.
From what I can remember off the top of my head, I did not recommend this organization because their budget was incomplete. And it wasn't clear exactly what they were intending to do with it. And I'm sorry, it doesn't want to load. Okay, so let's see. Okay, I did not recommend them for any of the service categories, and most of the categories, they didn't provide an actual plan for what they would be doing for each of the services. The budget form was incomplete. Also, I felt that what they did include in the budget wasn't realistic for serving all service areas over a 4-year period. Let's see. Oh yeah, their milestones were really unclear. And a lot of the answers to their questions were like really vague and broad. So by the time I got through it, it just wasn't clear to me exactly what they would be doing with our funds and how that relates to our service areas. I also was concerned that some of what they did describe isn't in alignment with the OARs for Measure 110. So like for housing specifically, it said that clients are required to attend all treatment requirements and follow a structured set of rules to remain in housing. My understanding is that for housing for Measure 110, it's supposed to be low barrier, and they can't necessarily require somebody to be in treatment. So that's why I did not recommend them.
Oop, there we go. Thanks for sharing that. And who was the other reviewer?
Evelyn was the other reviewer. I'm not sure that they're here today.
Hearing not, she hasn't chimed in. How can someone?
Would you like, I have her
Oh, you have it
application open.
Thank you, Kylie.
The response is the same throughout for every note. So I will read that and that'll be just a blanket response. Even though it is difficult to place this application in just one type of service, an applicant selected all. I say yes because they are planning to use these funds to pay for their house manager for Redmond supportive housing, partial salary for mentor, CADC/ICD counselor, benefits for retention/recruitment, supportive housing, and outpatient and partial hospitalization.
Thanks, Kylie. Any other questions, concerns, inquiries about this list? And if you want, if you're ready, give me a thumbs up. If you want me to move to some potential recommendations, you might want to switch some of the recommendations out. But I want to give it several beats before I do that, see if there's any other questions. Okay. All right, I'm going to try to click us forward here. Just as a reminder, we went ahead and summarized when both reviewers recommended bringing the amount over formula down to $5 million rather than the 6 previously shown. So here's a couple of different proposals. Ariana is here today, but unfortunately really struggling with this head cold that's been going around. But are you available to unmute and just very briefly summarize what proposal 1 entails?
Yes, I am. I apologize for my voice. My focus and my thinking with where I pared this down had to do with the fact that the Deschutes County Health Services and County Juvenile Justice and were because they're governmental organizations, they have multiple funding streams, whereas smaller places don't necessarily have those. And so I tried not to cut down on places like Rimrock Trails and Ideal Option that didn't necessarily have access to the same funding that the Deschutes County organizations would. And the reason that Best Care got cut down on screening is that they were asking a very large amount for that. So screening, as you know, is available through the hotline that the state is running. Program costs, same kind of thing. So if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Okay, I'm going to roll to some other options just to get our conversation. No, I'm not, because Jude's got her hand up. Go ahead.
Sorry.
Huh?
So I understand what was just said, but I'm also looking at some of the applicants and they can accept insurance as well. So I'm really confused as to why we would let some people that accept insurance be smaller than others. If someone could just explain that rationale. I mean, I understand the government part, but government, in my understanding, picks up where people that accept insurance don't, right? So they would serve anyone who walks through their doors, whether or not they have insurance or not.
That is a very fair point and something that the OAC should take into consideration.
Mm-hmm. And this group as well, which is why we included in that kind of priority thinking. It's, we bundled together 3 different priorities. One is unable to bill Medicaid. And I also don't know if, I know as someone with a criminal justice background, I do know that we can't yet use Medicaid for folks who are in custodial situations. So I don't know whether there's, impact on Deschutes County General Fund. I'm asking, I'm exploring that. I don't know if folks who reviewed the juvenile justice application have any thoughts about that. But that is absolutely what we want to discuss here to make some good recommendations. Ron, your hand's up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just curious. The 23,307 is that within allocation?
That should be on the comparison slide also.
Okay.
Here's that yellow 23,302.
Okay, thanks.
Ish is the formula. Okay. All right. So this is a way of thinking. We could absolutely have a conversation about or have folks dive into the Deschutes County applications about their ability to bill Medicaid or have other revenue sources outside of DTRSF. And I note that we're at 10:43. I want to make sure we continue a little more conversation since it doesn't feel like we're quite yet to the bottom of this conversation yet. I'm going to move on to the next option. And if you have a question, please go ahead and chime in or comment. And this is simply another option, just looking at reviewer scores and that weighted priority thinking to try to simply stratify this a little more. That is heavy, again, with the Deschutes County options. And if there are, again, inquiries about those, we can go ahead and take another look. So what are people thinking about the best proposal or the best recommendations, rather, for Deschutes County? And now that we've seen these, I'm going to go back to the main. Here we go. So what are folks thinking? Do you need more information before making some possible recommendations? What other information do you need, Judith?
Sorry, it looks to me, at least in one, that we've eliminated ideal options completely. Am I correct?
Yep.
Can we talk about why that happened?
So looking forward, that was in this one, and that was simply to get us closer to the formula amount using the scores and knowing that decisions are hard. And if ideal option had a high quality application and those reviewers feel like that's a really important thing to fund, that's what we need to talk about. So again, these are just starting points. And we really crave your feedback to identify what is the right thing to recommend. So can look into that.
Oops, can I add? Yeah, it's very difficult as we're flipping between the screens to see who's been eliminated because you have to like scan and then remember. Just saying,
Well,
I'm not my brain.
That's why I sent these out last night. So you should have them in your inbox and should be able to pull them up
Okay,
to be
I
able to
will,
look
yeah.
at. I sent them last night, like eight-ish, I think, or something.
Okay, thanks.
Awesome. Love the hands. My dog needs to go out, so I need to go let him out. Go ahead and please just take turns and start participating. Thank you.
Just quickly, Carly, do we have a comparison slide at the end of this presentation that we could go to? Because that talks about who is funded.
And I'm screen sharing, so that really sets me up to make sure the dog holds it for long enough. Here we go.
There we go.
Dana, your hand's up first, then Elizabeth, and Emily, Ariana, then Ron. Dana, go ahead.
Sure. I wanted to address some of the comments that were made in regards to, I think, Best Care and maybe Rimrock in regards to their ability to bill for Medicaid covered services. I reviewed Best Care's proposal in their budget, and when I was reviewing their application, they really did take some time to ensure that the funds that they were requesting were for services and supports that weren't covered by other funders. So a lot of their budget had to do with outreach and engagement efforts. And so when I was looking at their proposed budget in regards to those services and supports, a lot of it had to go towards staffing and personnel costs that would support those efforts. When I was looking at the screening costs, it looked very reasonable in regards to the staffing and the efforts that were being put forth, as well as assessments and treatment. So the cost for those services, which are Medicaid covered services, was pretty low for an annual cost. So I just wanted to put that out there that part of my recommendation to fund was based off of their proposed budget, the services that they were wanting to cover with the funds, and the staffing. And I felt it was very reasonable in regards to what they were offering and their ability to leverage other funding sources.
Thank you for that, Dana. And would anybody like me to navigate to a different side? Now you've got them in your inbox, you can pull them up as you want. Just want to make sure I'm displaying the right information for the conversation. I'm going to go back to the primary screen. Elizabeth, please go ahead.
I apologize. I may be off topic. I had a clarifying question in proposal number 2. So one of the things that I know Ideal Options does primarily is MAT, which isn't always easy to get access to. So I'm just curious if we happen to know by any chance if the other providers in proposal 2 would also be offering MAT services?
So, thank you. Sorry, I can not figure out how to go back to the slide I was showing. That would be a question about Best Care and Deschutes County Health, what type of harm reduction or SUD treatment they are proposing, to articulate that. So that would be a question for those reviewers. And if you were a reviewer, can you just unmute yourself and respond to the question?
I'm in the project scope for their harm reduction in Deschutes County. Would you like me to read that?
Well, it depends where they put MAT. So is there a way to?
I don't see it listed in their project scope for
Or
harm reduction.
What about SUD?
I'm not seeing it definitively said. They are talking about providing assessment, medication management through in-kind licensed medical provider, LMP, therapy, case management. But it doesn't say anything specific to MAT.
Does any, I keep pinning myself on accident. Does anybody have any other insights about medication assisted treatment or medication supported recovery in any of these applicants? Maybe that's something, Jason, between maybe you and Kathy, and Kylie, if you could dig around a little bit just to see. And I know that's opening a bunch of applications. I'd like to try to get that discussion into this space, but I've got hands up, so I want to let folks ask questions
I've
as
checked
well.
Rimrock Trails. I don't see anything about MAT. That confirms Kylie's thing, and I'm continuing to search the other
Awesome.
ones. So
Awesome, Kathy. Thank you. Emily, go ahead.
So I had a couple things. One is, I think is related, and I have a feeling they're not here since they haven't spoken up yet, but I was hoping to just hear from the folks who reviewed Ideal Option. If not, if those folks that are looking at the applications, I feel like they provide services for folks in jail and in incarceration. I feel like that's an important service. And so I just want to make sure we understand where they're operating and where their funds are going before we have any discussion about leaving them out based on their scores. And then I guess I just have a clarifying question on how we're considering folks that can bill Medicaid, so that I understand kind of like the stance on it moving forward. Because I've heard both, like, folks need to be able to say that they can bill Medicaid because they need to have sustainable services. But then I've also heard us call out that folks can bill Medicaid, so we shouldn't be prioritizing them for funding. And then this is kind of layered on top of the fact that folks can't use this money to supplant Medicaid funds. So like none of these dollars can be used for Medicaid services, Medicaid billable services. Is there like because I know it's one of our like priority score things, is there like a stance that the OAC has or that we should have on Medicaid and the ability to fund it, just so I know moving forward how we're viewing this?
Ron, are you wanting to speak to that? Yes, you are.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of, I'm doing this from memory. and I've seen it in some of the proposals. However, essentially as I understand it, in terms of the way it's written, is that Measure 110 funds can't be used to supplant. Those funds can't be used to supplant other funding, such as insurance or Medicaid. And so if Medicaid is already paying for something, you can't then free up elements in your budget by using Medicaid, Measure 110 funds. The intent, as I recall, and it's in my mind regarding Measure 110 funds, is mostly folks who are categorically ineligible for Medicaid, folks who are uninsured or underinsured, or folks who are unable to obtain insurance. That's the way I understand it. Does that answer your question?
Kind of. I guess I'm just more interested in, like, from this evaluation standpoint, it seems like we're both like wanting people to be able to build Medicaid, but also it seems like it's something that we're also
Like what I've seen
not funding.
what I've seen in proposals is folks addressing the gaps, is that
Right.
and generally speaking, when I see these numbers, that's what's rolling through my head, is that these are the gaps between, these are folks who are uninsured, categorically ineligible, underinsured, and that sort of thing.
Yep.
Sam, our adult behavioral health director, what say you?
I want to comment, but I just want to, I'm curious to hear from Jude first, because I suspect she's going to flesh that out, and then I'm happy to comment.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks. So I pulled up their the scope and I remember their application. One of the things that struck me about this application is their ability to do what Ron was just saying, is kind of fill in these gaps that exist. And so when we talk about medication assisted treatment, there's multiple kinds, right? That one can access. One is buprenorphine, one is methadone. Methadone is very specifically delivered. It says here that they're asking for funding for additional positions to expand a mobile treatment team that would provide assessments, medication management, but they're not billing this grant. They're using in-kind licensed medical provider time, therapy, case management, peer support, and harm reduction. So it looks to me that they are using existing resources in the way that they're supposed to and bill them, but moving it into this mobile treatment. And really, I think in some ways, it seems to me as I read their application that they are closing the gap between when people are ready and not able to get places, which in rural areas is a real thing. And so that was kind of my take on their application. Is it seemed like it was very thoughtfully put together about how they were looking at where the gaps were and seeing the needs to kind of fill that with things that they can't necessarily bill.
Thank you. Sam, anything to add? Then I'll move to the comments.
I think I'm just trying to understand the heart of the question here. I just with all the comments, and I think if it's a question about who can bill Medicaid, and typically if a treatment program provides a service, they can bill Medicaid. My understanding is they cannot enhance that payment with other funds, but they could utilize, as Ron said, the funds that they receive for other services that would not be supported by Medicaid. I also know that in some instances of MAT, if it's a particular kind of medication, depending on who they're billing, there can be a delay, there can be a requirement for, folks to try other things. And so I can also see where a provider would be like, look, we're going to have some funding, so we have low barrier access to to these services that we know people need and that our doctor said is the best way to support their recovery. So I don't know if that answers the question. I think that the issue of Medicaid is probably around like not so much whether or not somebody can bill Medicaid only, but whether or not, you know, that offsets the cost of what they're asking, or if they're asking for funds to do something outside of their traditional Medicaid billing.
Keisha.
Yeah, I was just looking at, for, what was it, Deschutes County Health Services, how big that, harm reduction ask is, and I'm just wondering what's entailed in that. I kind of
Yeah.
heard it, but,
Yeah.
um,
Let's have Kylie read off a little bit more about what's covered in the harm reduction scope for Deschutes County Health Services.
Sure.
Thank you.
So they indicate in their response for harm reduction that the Deschutes County Health Services Reduction Program provides a robust array of harm reduction services, including referrals to Hep C and HIV testing, Narcan distribution, syringe exchange, safe supplies, outreach, engagement, and referrals. In 2023 alone, the team completed over 2,800 services, provided 2,605 naloxone kits, and reversed 187 overdoses. We expect to serve 814 unique individuals in 2025 with a 5% increase each program year. In addition, we anticipate conducting 3,256 encounters in 2025 with a 5% increase each program year. Through the current burn grant, in conjunction with funding from the Save Lives Oregon Clearinghouse, HRP was able to expand offering 4 hours a week of direct harm reduction services to 18 to 14 hours a week. New services were added in Sisters and Lapine, creating access in rural areas of the county and representing a 142% increase in number of encounters with a highly vulnerable population between 2022 and 2023.
Awesome. Thank you.
You are welcome.
We're going to go to Elizabeth, and then we are at 40 minutes for Deschutes County, and I want to assess where we're at. Elizabeth, go ahead.
Oh, just quick comment. I feel like we already moved on with the Medicaid billing. Just to remind people, there can still be bills associated after insurance is taken into account and ran for a patient, and they may not be able to pay those bills. And so providers have been able to use Measure 110 funds to pay those so that they don't disrupt the continuum of care or services. So just to throw that out for people to consider as well.
Thank you. So it's not simple, it's not clean, it's not black and white, but really making sure that we're not simply using the DTRSF monies to kind of do a status quo Medicaid reimbursable or using it in any way that could be used otherwise. Keisha, and then we're gonna.
Sorry, last thing, I was looking at the
Yeah.
proposals, I just really. Sorry, hold on. I would like to see ideal options, back in the.
Yep, great. So that is why that was a really positive conversation about ideal option. So thank you for that inquiry. This proposal keeps ideal option on the table and takes liberties by trying to reduce some of the organizations thoughtfully that of course the OAC would need to contemplate, and we would kind of move forward with negotiations in the end. But thinking about the ways that either larger government entities might be able to manage the funds at a lesser amount, and potentially screening could be handled through through Medicaid. Sorry, my dog is barking and interrupting my train of thought. So I am leaving, I'm still screen sharing, yes I am, the proposal 1 on the table. And I want to ask the group, how do you feel about this? Is there anything you would want to change as we move forward with contemplating Deschutes? Dana.
From my review of Best Care, I'm having a hard time justifying screening being reduced so significantly. Their proposal was really heavy in regards to those screening efforts to for as it relates to outreach. So it's more than just having the phone call being an option for people to receive screening. This was about different types of staff being available out in the community, reaching out. So, for example, they have peers that they were wanting to fund, greeters, ED staff. So it was really, in my opinion, a comprehensive aspect of their application. And so reducing the screening seems outside of what their main proposal was. And so that it does, to me, it doesn't make sense to reduce something so significantly when that was a large part of their ask of their application.
So looking at their ask, which was $1.4 million, this proposal brings it down to 110, pun intended. So that means that if we move forward with a beefier screening total for Best Care, that we would be up over formula, and either we could recommend to the OAC another place to reduce, or we could leave it to the OAC and the negotiation process to figure out kind of how this all shakes out. Thoughts?
Yeah, so for me, it would be more, I would leave it up to the negotiation to reduce their budget for there to be a more meaningful conversation with Best Care in regards to how to reduce their budget to stay within budget, if that makes sense.
Okay, Sam?
Yeah, I would agree with Dina, just because assessment and SUD may be an area that they could reduce, where some of those screening activities Dina outlined would not be covered potentially in their billable time. So that makes sense.
So is there a motion on the table? Does anybody want? Are we at that point? Is there other discussion or questions about this proposal and got ideal option in there still? Rimrock, Deschutes, both the health services and juvenile, and a potential beefing up of the screening amount to Best Care that could be handled through negotiation processes. Ron?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to recommend proposal number 1 with consideration for increasing screening amounts for Best Care.
A second.
Second.
Okay. Discussion, if any. Questions, comments, concerns? Keisha.
Yeah, I would just, I mean, I wouldn't move to reduce the funding screening for Best Care. I kind of heard in some of the other proposals, they were making referrals to other organizations, but so I don't know.
Yeah, so the motion is this proposal, but leaving the screening back up where it was, and which was, I'm sorry, I'm going to edit this in real time, which was about 1.4 million. I don't have the exact numbers on hand. So I don't want to make y'all nauseous by tabbing back and forth, and allowing for the negotiation process to figure out the most thoughtful level of funding, but to leave it as is and just knowing it's over.
Okay.
I believe that's accurate. Okay. Thanks, Kylie. 1.407. You see it all there. So, all right, any other discussion? Do we need to have the motion in the chat or re-articulated, or are we ready to vote? I believe the motion was to move forward recommending proposal 1 and putting Best Care Treatments screening proposal back at $1.4 million, knowing that that would need to be negotiated. You ready to vote on that? Okay. Roll call vote, please, Carly. Thank you.
Amy, how do you vote?
Yes.
Keisha,
Yes.
Melinda,
Yes.
Nicole Silva,
Yes.
Ron Williams,
Yes.
Zeb,
Yes.
Abby,
Yes.
Ariana,
Yes.
Ane,
Yes.
Dana,
Yes.
Daniel,
Yes.
Danielle,
Yes.
Elizabeth,
Yes.
Emily,
Yes.
Gregory,
Yes.
Greta,
Yes.
Hannah,
Yes.
Judith,
Yes.
Juliana,
Yes.
June,
Yes.
Kathy,
Yes.
Kylie,
Yes.
Kirsten,
Sorry, I'm gonna abstain. I just got here.
got it. Liz,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Maya,
Yes.
did Nicole Corbin pop in? Oh,
She's out this week.
okay. Nicole Egler,
Yes.
Rachel,
Yes.
Sam,
Yes.
Sarah Adelhart,
Yes.
Sean McMahon,
Yes.
Stanley,
Yes.
Tammy,
Yes.
Tatiana,
Yes.
and Tim.
Yes.
And that passes with 34.
Great. Thank you for the conversation. I appreciated that quite a bit. And I just want to give a big shout out to the Measure 110 staff for just making that so effortless and being able to speak for those reviewers who are unable to be here today. I am a facilitator who loves taking breaks, but we can't. So if you'll need to step away for a minute, let your dog out, have a bio break, whatever it is you need to do, please do so. We have Grant and Harney counties on deck. I think we can actually get them both done. And I'm going to put some positivity in the world and say we might even be able to get done early. Maybe, maybe not. We'll give it a go. So I'm going to present. By the end of this, I'm going to be a screen sharing pro here. We're moving on to Grant County, Oregon, and I'm going to screen share and start with but one day I'll be able to click and talk at the same time. That day is not today. With the call for conflicts, our two applicants for Grant County, Oregon are Boulder Care Provider Group and Community Counseling Solutions. Does anybody here today have an actual or a potential conflict? All right, hearing none, we're going to move forward. Come on, computer, let's go. All right. Here's Grant County. Located in Eastern Oregon, is known for its geologic beauty, including Condon fossil beds and the Painted Hills. The county seat is Canyon City. It's next to John Day, a hub for healthcare, tourism, and agriculture. The region is rural, offering diverse recreational opportunities. Challenges of that community include poverty and aging population and transportation issues. The population of Grant County is just over 7,000 as of 2023. Median household income, 56,000. They've got the racial composition. Poverty rate 16, age distribution indicated there, IDD disability rates at 12%, low to moderate income at 41%, and unemployment is at 4.5%. And a reminder, y'all have these slides in your email inboxes if you want to do a deeper dive or go back and forth between the two. Like the rural floor of each county, this county, amongst others, does have the minimum, the maximum minimum, the floor of $2 million. So that's like, we didn't want to start anywhere lower than that. So the two applications that were submitted by Boulder Care and CCS both passed minimum scoring requirements. The total applicant ask is $2.1 million, which is $114,000 over the formula amount. All right. And here you've got your green, blue, and orange table for your reading pleasure. I want to highlight just a couple of things that are probably also obvious to you, that one of two reviewers for CCS, Community Counseling Solutions, recommended funding screening and housing. And so that is something to consider because that would, if we need a full burn, we need all of the service areas paid for and provided. And so that is something we might want to have a conversation about. The CCS reviewers, see if they're here today to illustrate or illuminate that thinking, or where that where the differences were. And then also note that neither reviewer recommended harm reduction for Boulder Care at $17,000. So I'm going to sit on this slide for a minute and ask our reviewers to chime in. Any concerns you have about these applications or these providers or the service areas proposed, and help us better understand the blue and orange areas. And also a call for concerns just generally from the panelists as well. So are the reviewers here today?
I reviewed Community Counseling Solutions.
Thanks, Juliana. Can you say more?
Yeah.
Did you pull it up?
Yes. The only one I declined to fund, because I did give them screening, was housing, and I'm just gonna read what I wrote. I didn't find that they met the criteria in the statute or rules for transitional supportive housing. They didn't indicate that they do or will provide transitional or supportive housing. They described activities that support individuals in seeking housing from other entities, as well as vouchers and financial assistance. But the way that the legislation was written, it was that those supplemental activities can be provided in addition to actually providing housing. So if the applicant is providing or proposing to provide transitional supportive housing in Grant County, it was unclear from the description in their project scope, and they didn't like name or describe any facilities or anything like that that would provide the service. And I found in other applications that were applying for housing, they actually talked about like what facilities they had. So as far as I could tell, they don't have any housing facilities. They're just doing some of that like case management kind of stuff to help find housing elsewhere. And please, somebody correct me if I misinterpreted I think it was 944 010 00880 what's the name of the rules that we were giving.
Great. Thank you for chiming in. Kylie, go ahead.
I was a reviewer for Boulder Care. And I said yes to sudden peer support, but I said no to harm reduction. The cost or the budget allotment that they indicated in their workbook was $17,000, and they only discussed Narcan and naloxone. And I know not to compare like all of best care like across the board, but that particular harm category has seemed really varied, but the content remains the same. And so for me personally, I said that 17,000 is not enough to perform comprehensive harm reduction services. They discussed the expansion and increase within their network of things like naloxone. Due to the limitations in the pharmacies, but it doesn't talk about wound care or anything else that may go with it.
And I just want to confirm, I heard you say best care. Did you mean Boulder Care?
That's what I meant.
Okay,
Boulder Care is what
great.
I meant. Yes.
Just want to be crystal clear. Thank you. Jude.
Thank you.
Hi, I also reviewed Boulder Care for this county. And I did not recommend the harm reduction services, given they're providing SUD treatment, and they talked only about naloxone, which is a medication that can be prescribed and covered by insurance at zero cost. And the amount that they were asking for looked almost equivalent to the amount of people that were going to be accessing SUD treatment in their budget. So they could meet that. What their intent was to get naloxone to those people by prescribing it and having it covered by insurance, including Medicaid. I felt like their peer support met at a minimum what was outlined, and that their services are mostly provided remotely in this county. So that's why I didn't recommend them for the harm reduction, because it didn't look adequate to me.
Okay, thanks for that. Anything else to add about Boulder Care before I move to Ariana? No. Okay, Ariana, go ahead.
I was the other reviewer for Community Counseling Solutions, and I did not recommend them for screening, but I did recommend them for housing. And the reason is that they're what they said about screening was it was unclear to me. As in my notes, I say the statement of service does not meet the requirements of OAR 944-1030 in the sense that it does not function 24/7. The 24-hour call line operated by CCS is not intended to be a screening line as it is described in this application. And what I want to say about their hotline is that it was to connect them with somebody. It was to connect the person who was calling with somebody who was already working with them in Community Counseling Solutions. It was not, you could call in and get support immediately, as my understanding of what they wrote was. But I did recommend them for housing, and the reason is that they, in their proposed budget, under their description of housing, they talk about rental assistance vouchers and emergency placement vouchers. And those are both things that we've funded before. And they also are really critical in a county that is remote and that experiences really, really harsh winters. So that was my thinking there.
That's really interesting to have both reviewers just have very different takeaways, but that's why we had 2 reviewers per application. Any questions from the panel today about these 2 applicants? Concerns?
I was curious if somebody could speak to the OARs, because I mean, I could be wrong in my interpretation, but it did look like the requirement was to provide housing, and then things like rental assistance could be supplemental to that. But if I'm incorrect about that, please let me know.
Anybody want to chime in? our Measure 110 rule expert moved over to a different OHA division, so we don't have her at the ready. And I'm just curious if there is anybody else on the 110 team who has.
I do have it pulled up.
I knew you would.
It is OAR 944-010-0080, transitional and supportive housing for individuals with substance use. An entity funded underneath ORS 430.3892 to provide transitional and supportive housing for individuals with substance use disorder must, prior to providing housing, conduct an assessment of the needs. A funded entity providing transitional supportive housing must provide at least one of the following types of transitional or supportive housing based on individuals' assessment to serve individuals at all points on the substance use continuum and across the gender spectrum for those who are transgender, gender nonconforming, and intersex. Emergency housing for individuals or families in transition for a period of 60 days for the purpose of facilitating the movement of such persons to a more permanent, safe, and stable living situation. Family housing for individuals with dependents that prioritizes not separating families, traditional or non-traditional. So it does sound like they're supposed to be providing housing. And they also have a permanent housing that includes support for independent living for individuals with substance use disorder and their families that does not have designated length of stay. There's also recovery housing that is abstinent-based or drug-free for people in recovery from addiction that includes a peer supportive community in individuals participating in outpatient substance use disorder treatment and those individuals with an ongoing program of recovery. Recovery housing must permit individuals to continue to receive medication-assisted treatment and must provide intervention before eviction strategies if a resident relapses. Supported housing that provides a safe place to live along with supports to the individual from the provider for accessing life-saving health services until the individual decides to participate in a program of recovery and referrals for treatment and recovery services when the individual chooses to seek a life without drugs. Supportive housing could or could not have drug-free requirements. Transitional housing for individuals who are houseless, along with appropriate supportive services to facilitate movement to independent living, is short-term. The addition to housing services described in subsection 1 of this rule, a funded entity may offer any of the following types of rental assistance. Section 8, tenant-based rapid rehousing and eviction prevention, assistance for fair market value, and assistance attached to wraparound services or assistance paid directly to individuals.
Thanks for the clutch, Kathy. That's awesome. Thank you for reading that. Jason, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I think there's a difference between the requirements of having a fully funded burn versus the requirements for an individual application to be funded here. So like a person to be funded for housing, they don't have to do everything that's listed under the rules. But for the burn to be fully funded, I think someone has to be doing that. So there's two different questions, and Shannon can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's sort of a two different layered question there, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree with that. Okay. Jude, go ahead.
Thanks. And I don't know if this could be noted as all of these counties move forward, but I think some type of statement, particularly as it relates to housing, which is such a critical life-saving intervention for folks that are using substances, whether or not the housing that's being funded in that burn does the full continuum from housing that is would be quote unquote sober living to housing that would be housing where someone isn't required to be abstinent. And so just that I think what was the person that just spoke before me, and I'm sorry you went off camera, made a good point that while one burn may not do, or one entity may not do all of them, that the call really is to have comprehensive housing. And my understanding is that housing is a priority. And so I think having that information to the OAC will be really important.
Okay. And that puts us in an interesting position considering that proposal is the only proposal for this county. And it's something we can note if there is a motion to move forward with this iteration of a burn in some shape or form, just to ensure that that array is happening. Ariana?
I'd like to speak to that in the sense that it's actually in the statute that burns or applicants may also propose in their funding applications to offer other innovative types of rental assistance. And it goes on to list that. But I would also like to point out that in rural counties where housing is at a premium, it's reasonable that especially in this case, where we only have one applicant for housing, it's quite possible that their intent is to stabilize these folks in these small towns and then find them permanent housing in other larger communities that are not necessarily in this county. Not sure how we would establish whether that's in fact the intent or not.
Sounds like what I'm hearing is that that's something for this group to flag for the ongoing decision-making about funding, particularly about housing in this community. I'm going to move us forward to where we're at. So if we, no, I'm not, I'm going to go back. Sorry for the whiplash here. When we look at the grand total, we're at $2.1 million. We're about $150K over for this formula, for this specific community. And I think the question I want to ask is about heartburn, not actual heartburn, but decision heartburn for screening and housing. After the conversation at hand today, are there any review panelists that do not want to move forward funding community counseling solutions for screening or housing? Because one of each of the reviewers did not recommend and the other did, which is different than having both not. And we need to have services in those areas. We can move forward with a different type of negotiation, but I first want to ask that question, whether there is heartburn from those who reviewed CCS moving forward funding, screening, and housing in some shape or form in Grant County.
I have no heartburn about it. This is Ariana.
And was it Giuliano, the other reviewer?
Yes, yeah, I declined to fund it, but if there are, just based on the rules that I saw, but if there are ways that this can be funded and it still works with the rules, then that's totally okay with me.
Okay, all right. I just wanted to do a bit of a gut check there. All right. So, basically what I'm saying then is that we need to, I would like to discuss, I'm trying to figure out the right language, to ensure that there is funding for screening and housing for CCS. And if you look here, removing the harm reduction, which is the double negative here, we're down to just 100,000 over the formula amount. And I think we can, this group, y'all can do whatever you want to do, but you can either, make a motion to move forward this and we'll figure out the 100K in negotiations. Or someone might say, no, I don't want to move forward with this dollar amount in this area and we could reduce that. How would you like to proceed? Judith. Oops.
Sorry. And maybe my brain just stopped for a second. Could someone reframe, if CCS is funded for housing, what parts of the continuum are funded and what parts of the continuum are not? The housing continuum.
Yep, got you. Oh my gosh, I can keep tabbing forward. So was that was Juliana and Ariana, I believe? Yes, thanks. Kat.
Yeah, so they're only asking for funding to fund some rental assistance activities and some case management. So helping clients look for housing and get secured into housing. So the part that is unfunded is actually one of those types of supported or transitional housing.
And I think we could say what's also unfunded is housing for people that are currently using, because finding someone who will rent to you in that situation, in my experience, a rental assistance program is not going to be sufficient for that type of housing need.
Okay.
So I am looking at 944-001-0020. I'm sorry, I'm like way down in there. Screening, behavioral needs, outreach.
I'm wondering if and Ariana, thank you for continuing to dig, if for time's sake, if we want to allow the OAC and the negotiation process to get into the weeds around the housing and ensure that what is covered at Grant County is fully compliant with those rules. And Keisha, I also see your hand up.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that rental assistance is part of housing. That is, yeah, part of housing too.
Yep, for sure, for sure. But I did note that there was concerns from the panel reviewers that transitional housing, permanent supportive housing, and housing for folks who are currently using drugs is potentially a gap in Grant County, and that should be considered moving forward in the subsequent decisions. That's what I heard.
Gotcha.
Okay. I believe my notes are accurate. I hope they are. Any other thoughts or comments about this potential proposal and moving forward?
I'm sorry to get in the weeds there, but I was just sort of looking at the 6 different types that they must offer of rental assistance. And from what I'm reading, they do offer all of those things, but they may not be called exactly what the statute calls them. And so that was the basis for my decision.
Understood. Okay. Thank you. Okay. So this is a potential area. I'm trying to not make a motion. If someone has any other questions or concerns, we are $97,000 over, which I think can be managed through the OAC and or negotiation processes. Would anybody like to, is it time for a motion, or is there more discussion to be had? Ron?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to approve this burn number 2 for Grant County.
Thank you, Ron. Jude? Jude, your hand's up?
Sorry, I was talking to a muted mic. As I was looking at this, there are some when we look at budgets there is significant program costs for CCS that are like, I almost feel like you could get within budget. That is, maybe I'm wrong, but.
Okay. Are you offering, I didn't hear a second to Ron's motion. Are you offering an alternative?
No. I don't know that there is an alternative.
Okay. Emily?
I second the motion.
Okay, thank you. Is there any discussion? Okay, hearing none. Let's take a roll call vote on Ron's motion that Emily seconded to approve what's on the screen, this potential burn number 2, with notes about ensuring housing is covered in that community. Carly?
Amy, how do you vote?
Yes.
Dharma? Not here. Keisha?
Yes.
Got it. Melinda,
Yes.
Nicole Silva,
Yes.
Ron Williams,
Yes.
and Zeb,
Yes.
Abby.
Sorry, yes.
Ariana, Ariana, are you still here?
Sorry, yes.
No worries. Ane,
Yes.
Dana,
Yes.
Daniel,
Yes.
Danielle,
Yes.
Elizabeth Padilla,
Yes.
Emily,
Yes.
Gregory,
Yes.
Greta,
Yes.
Hannah,
Yes.
Judith,
Yes.
Juliana,
Yes.
June,
Yes.
Kathy,
Yes.
Kylie,
Yes.
Kirsten,
Yes.
Liz,
Yes.
Mark.
Yeah, delete.
Okay, thank you. Maya,
Yes.
Nicole Egler,
Yes.
Rachel,
Yes.
Sam,
Yes.
Sarah Adelhart,
Yes.
Sean,
Yes.
Stanley,
Yes.
Tammy,
Yes.
Tatiana,
Yes.
and Tim.
Yes.
And that passes with 34. Back to you, Abby.
Thank you, Carly. Sorry, I'm making some news jokes. I'm really looking for some levity today. Thank you, everybody. And congratulations. We've completed 2 counties with 20 minutes left. I'm going to dive right into Harney County. Again, if you need to take a moment, please take a moment, do so. And I'm really excited. I just taught myself how to present from the current slide, so I will not make you all nauseous as I tab back and forth between these slides so much. So I can learn things every day. All right. Harney County. Here we go. Except it's not forwarding. There we go. Call for conflicts. Our 2 applicants for Harney County are Boulder Care Provider Group and Symmetry Care. Is there a potential or actual conflict of interest for Harney County providers? Applicants, pardon me. Hearing none. You know the drill. And to our overview of Harney County. In parts of southeastern Oregon is the largest county by land area, known for vast high desert landscapes and outdoor recreational opportunities. Burns is the county seat, serves as a cultural and administrative hub. Harney County has a small rural population of approximately 7,500 residents, with its economy historically rooted in agriculture, ranching, and natural resource management. Celebrated for its wildlife, and like many other rural areas, Harney County faces challenges such as economic diversification, healthcare access, and declining youth retention. Median household income, just shy of $51,000 a year. The racial composition is 85% white, 5% Hispanic or Latina, 1% Native, and 9% other. Poverty rates 12%. Here's the age distribution. Disability rates, 12.5. Approximately 45 to 50% of residents meet HUD-defined low to moderate income thresholds, and the unemployment rate is just under 6%. So both of the applicants who applied are met our minimum submission requirement, MSR, and the total countywide ask is $2.15 million, and the countywide difference between the ask and the formula is $150,000. So this is a similar situation to what we just covered in Grant County. Here are your applicants. You'll note one of the things we have started to do, we'll continue to do so, is noting if it is a current burn that they will be yellow in the entity name there. You notice the Grant County both were. So looking at the different reviewer scores, all in the 20s, Symmetry Care a little higher with 2729. It looks like Symmetry Care loaded up their program costs and did apply for those 4 service areas that are in blue, but did not detail their budget to indicate the cost per service area. The 2 areas where both reviewers recommended funding was for housing and harm reduction for Symmetry Care, and Boulder Care Provider Group applied for SUD, peer support, and harm reduction in the amounts shown here. So before I move on to potentially ways to do this, I would like to call for concerns or feedback or questions about these providers, their service areas, and their application details. Please, Ron, go ahead.
Yeah, just to clarify what you just said about Symmetry, and so they intend to provide, or they indicated that they would be providing screening, assessment, SUD, and peer support, and then loaded those costs into the program budget?
That is my guess. I would like to have the reviewers indicate specifically what they saw. This is what we've been seeing in other counties when there's a dollar amount of 0, or like there's one provider that had like a $16 in each of those service areas. We noted that the program costs were really, really high. And so people use their budget workbooks in different ways. So I'd love to, there are both Jude and Keisha have got their hands up, and I also want to make sure we give Symmetry Care and Boulder Care reviewers an opportunity to chime in and ensure that what we are seeing here is well represented and thoughtful, particularly because both reviewers did not recommend any of the screening, assessment, SUD, and peer support service areas for both applicants. Starting with Jude, go ahead.
I was hoping, if I'm remembering, and maybe I'm mistaken, I thought we had talked about Harney in the past. But if someone could refresh, what are the harm reduction activities that they are proposing, and what experience do they have doing those? And then just to note, I know that Harney County is a huge county. It's like twice the size of Connecticut. So really understanding in-person services versus really important, remote services.
Fantastic questions. Let's give a pause for our Symmetry Care, all 4 reviewers for the harm reduction service areas for both Boulder Care and Symmetry to chime in to answer that question. The service array of harm reduction.
This is Stanley. I did Symmetry Care, and for their harm reduction, they talked about MAT services and accessing registered nurses. And that's what they provided for harm reduction, the Narcan kits.
Thanks, Stanley. Who else is online today?
I don't think we have any other reviewers for these in the meeting today. So I think
Okay.
that, yeah, we think we'll have to just look them up.
Thanks.
I am looking at, to Ron's question, I believe it was, and I'm sorry, it was 2 questions ago, I think. So I am looking at Symmetry Care's budget, and just to confirm, what they did is all of their personnel and training costs are in program costs for all the services. They just put them in that area, and they only put services and supplies into the specific service areas. So that's why the budget looks that way. The 1.8 million represents all of their training and personnel costs in total across all the service areas.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Jason. And I think that puts a burden on Kylie to look at the harm reduction from the other 3 reviewers for both providers. And Keisha and Emily, I see your hands up. I just want to get this question answered.
I actually was going to further capitalize because Symmetry is the one that has the coffee cart that has an intertwined, it's a layered woven situation, and that is why it looks like this. So I've pulled up their milestone chart to give some clarity into each service. So their goal is to purchase and stock a coffee truck, ensure that it is fully operational with outreach and resource material, hire 2 consumer/employees to staff said coffee truck, expand Symmetry Care ranch operation to focus on greenhouse and garden operations that will be supplying fresh produce to the overall coffee shop as well as residential programs. It includes hiring 2 employees who will learn the nursery greenhouse skills, food, nutrition, and production. There's also an expansion of maintenance and construction functions for all program facilities by hiring 3 new consumer/employees for sud treatment. So the first one about the coffee truck was screening. The past 3 that I've talked about is sud treatment. So this ranch and operations. Next, in harm reduction, it's purchasing of the naloxone kits for Symmetry Care locations and community partners, which they're averaging about 10,000 annually. Housing, it's vouchers like discussed before, and the peer support is where Fresh Start, the coffee house, as well as the ranch housing, will have CRM support and supervision. So it is a workforce solution intertwined within that.
Great. So certified recovery mentors. And do you have Boulder Care's application handy to peek at their harm reduction proposal?
I pulled it up if you
You
want
did?
me to go ahead
Awesome.
and.
Thanks, Jason.
Yeah. So it does look like it's basically delivering, and sorry, I said I had it up and I scrolled away after I realized. Just a second, let me get back to it. I was looking at multiple things, and I was just trying to get back to where it says it. But it's basically delivering it remotely. Just naloxone is basically what is all.
Naloxone. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you both.
Mm-hmm.
Keisha and then Emily.
Yeah, I kind of would like to see an option in Harney County, not just Symmetry. And I know they have a whole garden and all that, and they're going to employ a few workers, but it's not really still talking about reducing substance use and things like that. So if anything, I would maybe reduce their budget some and add Boulder Care in.
Okay, thank you for that. Keisha is pondering reducing Symmetry Care in some regard, and making sure that Boulder Care is a second option available to Harney County residents. I hope I summarized that right, Keisha. Emily?
Yep, that's good.
Yeah, I agree with what Keisha just said. I was also just wanted to clarify, because this has come up before, with all the zeros there. Are these, someone said no, or someone said not applicable because there are zeros?
So that's what Kylie just summarized.
Oh, sorry.
And Jason just did, that they applied, but they loaded all of those costs into program.
Right. Okay. Did a reviewer say no, or did a reviewer say not applicable?
Oh, I get your question. Yeah, that's a good point. Let's get that answered. Of the blue, so one reviewer said yes. Did the other reviewer say no, or did the other reviewer say NA? Because the budget workbook was funky. Jason, Kylie.
Yeah, looking, it may be it. I think it is. I think you're correct, Emily, that
it's an NA.
These are all NAs because in their case, it was NA, not no necessarily. I think they looked at the budget. Well, I can't speak for Grace, who was the reviewer, but they put NA, not no. I will just say that that's yeah.
And the response is not applicable / blank is the
Got
no.
it. Okay. Thanks for that clarification, Emily. And Jude.
I
have a question and then a comment. I think I'll do my comment first. I don't think that this county has a viable harm reduction area. I don't think either one should be funded for harm reduction. That being said, my other question was, is Symmetry Care also the CMHP? If I'm remembering correctly, I don't know if Sam is still here.
I'm sorry, scrolling through the names. I don't see Sam still here.
Sam's not here. She had to leave, but I believe it is.
I agree with that.
So Jude, you do not think these harm reduction proposals are good or should be funded?
I don't think that they meet what harm reduction is. And the activities being proposed for Boulder Care would be billable. And for Symmetry Care, it doesn't seem like it's thought out. It's and harm reduction, as we've said before, for a county is more than naloxone. So I think that I don't know that they didn't seem to articulate experience doing harm reduction. I'm not sure if they've done it in the past. But I don't know what you do when you don't have a viable option. My understanding is you can seek that out to get harm reduction into Harney County.
Other panelists' thoughts about harm reduction specifically? June, thank you.
Yeah, I agree with Jude. I don't think that either one of these organizations are doing true harm reduction, or we can't just say that Narcan is doing harm reduction. So it's part of it, but it's not a harm reduction program.
Are there I don't think we have enough reviewers here for me to ask this question, but I'm going back to the heartburn question. So what I'm hearing and trying to reflect the conversation today is that, Harney County is enormous, and having more than one providers is key, and that both of these providers' applications for harm reduction are incomplete. Is there a proposal on the table to move forward with the remaining 5 service areas and have the OAC and the negotiation process readdress harm reduction in Harney County to build out better harm reduction if possible?
This is Jude. Sorry, I didn't raise my hand. I guess my proposal would be you could move forward with a note that the harm reduction section remains unaddressed, and the OAC needs to do what the OAC does when there's not an adequate applicant for those services for a county. And I'm not sure if handling it through negotiation, it could be through an RFP, like you could get a provider in there that could do harm reduction that's experienced. Or otherwise, but Ron, you can say.
My experience with this in previous cycles was that it was OHA that would reach out to existing providers in the county or neighboring county who's funded in a burn to offer inclusion into the burn where the service area is missing or inadequate.
Okay.
And it would be OHA's role to do that.
Great. Thank you. Still learning. Ariana?
I want to point out that Harney County Health Department does do harm reduction, including syringe replacement, disposal, education, naloxone, and linkage to treatment, et cetera, et cetera. So those services they do exist in Burns, which is basically the only urban area in the county, for our consideration.
Thank you. Jude.
Yeah, I think we would need to confirm the extent of that program before assuming that they're able to cover all of Harney County. But it could be a provider that OHA reached out to better understand the scope of their services and how to enhance that. And it might be on their website. I just think we always need to confirm existence, true existence of harm reduction services because of the lack of sustainable funding.
Okay, great. We are just about at time, and I'm curious if there is a motion on the table acknowledging the conversation we're in the middle of about harm reduction and that this county is still 150K over. We can, again, that can be managed in other decision points or decision processes. I'm curious if there's a motion on the table before we close.
Can I make a motion? This is Kathy Cervantes.
Yeah, you reviewed applications, right, Kathy?
I did.
Yeah.
I
so-
move that we move Harney County forward for approval with the notations of confirming harm reduction services and allowing OHA to reach out to neighboring counties for inclusion of those services and make sure that we confirm whether or not their scope of service. I hope that was too wordy, right?
Jude? Jude? Jude, you're muted if you're trying to talk.
Sorry, I had a beautiful sentence, but could I amend that to say voting on all of the sections, removing harm reduction in the symmetry care and Boulder, and then saying the OAC and OHA will work towards getting comprehensive harm reduction into Harney County.
So Shannon, are you still here? Kathy made a motion, and then do I need to ask for a second or the amend? What help?
There, I think either way, I think that based on Jude's comments, that Kathy could amend the motion if she wants to, and if not, right, then we need to wait for a second and go from there.
Great, thanks, Shannon. Appreciate your guidance. Kathy, what say you? Motion,
I can amend it. I just need, I feel like I was too wordy on it, but we want to move Harney County forward with removing harm reduction. Is that what you were saying, Jude?
Removing the funding, like saying that harm reduction category remains, needs to be addressed. So not awarding funding for that as it's written in what we're looking at. I just want to I think that's what you were saying, and I was.
Well, right, it was really looking at, you really wanted to confirm about the scope of services that we get, whoever we get to do this, right? Okay, so.
Yeah, I was saying, I don't believe either one of these groups should be awarded funding for harm reduction today.
Okay, so I make a motion that Harney County move forward to the OAC with recommendations to remove the funding for harm reduction from both entities. And have OHA, how do we want to do that? Reach out to neighboring counties?
May I offer a friendly amendment?
Please.
To reach out to other entities within Harney County to provide areas of service that are not encompassed in this proposal.
Okay, there's a motion on the table to move forward with Harney County to fund Boulder Care and Symmetry Care for 5 service areas to not recommend the funding for harm reduction and to have the Oregon Health Authority explore providing harm reduction services in and around Harney County to ensure a full service array. Is there a second?
Did I catch it in there?
I second.
Second. Oh, I'll second if you need it.
All
Amy.
right, everybody's seconding. Liz, do you have a discussion? Liz?
Yeah, I guess I just have a question. Before jumping to approaching other entities, wouldn't we just approach Symmetry Care and ask if they could provide a more robust harm reduction plan? It seems like we're taking an extra step by just immediately going elsewhere.
Seems like that was permissible under the motion.
I agree with that because we, within Harney County or neighboring counties, so,
So reach out to providers
yes.
in that community. Okay. I think we're clear enough to take a vote. And then we'll be done. So let's, Carly, vote on this, please, and thank you.
Amy, how do you vote?
Yes.
Keisha has left. Melinda?
Yes.
Nicole Silva? She may have stepped out too. Ron Williams?
Yes.
Zeb? Is he still here? Abby?
Yes.
Ariana?
Yes.
Ane?
Yes.
Dana?
Abstain.
Daniel?
Yes.
Danielle?
Yes.
Elizabeth? Elizabeth, if you unmuted, I didn't hear you. I'm sorry.
I think she left early.
Okay. Thank you. Emily?
Yes.
Gregory?
Yes.
Greta?
Yes.
Hannah?
Yes.
Judith?
Yes.
Juliana?
Yes.
June?
Yes.
Yeah.
Kylie?
Yes.
Kirsten?
Yes.
Liz?
Yes.
Maya?
Yes.
Nicole Egler?
Yes.
Rachel?
Yes.
Sam? I think she stepped out. Sarah Adelhart?
Yes.
Sean?
Yes.
Stanley?
Yes.
Tammy?
Yes.
Tatiana?
Yes.
And Tim? Oh, I think 2. And that passes with 28.
Okay. I apologize. We're 7 minutes over. Thank you for everybody for sticking around for a bit. I appreciate this a lot, and we will be scheduling more panel review meetings and doing our best to usher us through this in a thoughtful way. Thanks, everybody. See you next time.